You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where we dive into lore, the hobby, and the chaos of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I'm your host Grizzly, and today we're crawling out from the caves, sharpening our fangs, and letting the madness take hold, because this episode is all about Gloomspite Gitz. Under the light of the bad moon, logic fades and lunacy reigns. Grots, squigs, and troggoths spill from their mushroom-choked tunnels in the tides of teeth, claws, and spores. They fight not for gold, glory, or even conquest. They fight because the moon told them to, and on their own twisted way, that makes them some of the most honest followers of the mortal realms. This faction is wild, unpredictable, and oddly poetic, equal parts comedy and horror. The Gitz represent everything that makes a grand alliance of destruction so fun. Chaos wrapped in cunning, absurdity, and somehow wins battles, and faith so strong it bends reality itself. Whether it's a squig stampede, a troggoth tantrum, or a mob of grots, screaming prayers to the lunatic moon, there's something beautiful about how unhinged it all is. For me, personally, this one hits close to home. I've been deep in the Gitz caves lately. I just finished building my Mangler Squigs, reinforced my grot's Bounderz, and rounded out my Squig Herd. It's been one of the most enjoyable projects I've worked on. Part nostalgia, part insanity. And now that everything's assembled, I'm finally getting to see that army take shape on the table in the way I imagined. In today's episode, we'll explore who the Gloomspite Gitz really are, where they come from, what drives their endless invasion, and how their madness mirrors the mortal realms themselves. We'll talk through the lore of the Bad Moon, the hobby side of the fungi-fueled maniacs, and how they play on the tabletops in this new edition. And maybe, by the end, you'll understand why so many of us can't help but grin like a squig every time we see the Bad Moon rising. So grab your loon shroom brew, keep your squigs on a leash, and let's get rolling. Every legend of the mortal realms begins with a spark of truth, and for the Gloomspite Gitz, that truth is madness given shape. Deep beneath the surface, in fungal caverns, slick with spores and glowing mushrooms, countless grots gather to worship their living god, the Bad Moon. No one truly knows what the Bad Moon is. Some claim it's a shard of the old world, torn free during the end times. Others believe it's a god beast whose hunger carved tunnels through reality itself. Whatever it is, the Gitz don't question. They believe, to them, the Bad Moon is a savior, their master, and the promise that one day the light of sanity will fade and the realms will be theirs again. When the Bad Moon rises, the air itself changes. Shadows stretch wrong, fungus blooms in the dark, squigs go feral, troggoths stir, and the grots lose what little reason they have left. Entire hordes pour out of their cave networks in what they call the Gloomspite. A wave of destruction that sweeps across the forests, mountains, and cities alike before vanishing back into the underground once the moon drifts away. The Gloomspite Gitz aren't just a single race. They're a coalition of lunatics bound by a shared devotion. The Moon Clan Grots. Fungus brew fungus potions that melts minds and weapons alike. The Squig Herders raise bouncing beasts, whose only thought is to bite whatever's closest. And then the Troggoths lumber behind. Simple but unstoppable, their hide thick enough to shrug off cannon fire. And in the deep places, where even the light refuses to go, the Spider-Fang Grots worship arachnid demigods the size of fortresses. All of them serve under the erratic guidance of Squig the Loon King, the self-proclaimed prophet of the Bad Moon. He claims that he can predict its path, though whether it's divine insight or sheer coincidence is anyone's guess. Around him, the great shamans and warlords squabble over favor, each certain that the lunacy is the purest form of faith. Two great events in recent history have pushed the Gitz from a lurking nuisance to the genuine power in the realms. The first came with the Necroquake, when Nagash's catastrophic ritual tore through the ley lines of magic and shook reality itself. The waves of death energy sent the Bad Moon into wild, unpredictable orbits, bathing whole regions in its sickly light for weeks at a time. The Gitz took this as a divine omen, proof that the Everdank, their vision of the world ruled by the shadow and fungus, was close at hand. Under its glow, grot tribes everywhere erupted from their tunnels in unending Gloomspite wars, spreading madness and spores across every realm they touched. The second turning point came not long after when, Squig led a massive invasion of Ayada, a once glittering city in the realms of Chamon. His hordes toppled its brass spires and blanketed the region in fungus until the very air shimmered with spore dust. When the bad mood lingered overhead, refused to move on, the grots declared it's a holy miracle, and they renamed the land the Loon King's domain. And for the first time in history, the Gitz held a lasting foothold above ground. It was madness turned into empire. Crude, filthy, and absolutely intentional. And now, a new power lumbers among them. Trugg the Troggoth King. Ancient, even by Troggoth standards, Trugg was awakened deep within Gur after centuries of hibernation. But when he rose, he found a strange, ancient device fused to his back. A magical relic of some forgotten age that pulses with unstable arcane energy. No one knows if it's a weapon, a curse, or a crown. What's certain is that it channels raw magic straight into Trugg's body, flooding him with power and fury. Wherever he walks, the ground cracks, storms of magic surge, and Troggoths gather in his shadow. Trugg doesn't lead out of ambition. He simply follows the pull of the artifact, and wherever it leads, the bad moon follows. Then, of course, there are the Squigs, the living embodiment of the Gitz spirit, equal parts adorable and horrifying. These carnivorous bouncing orbs of muscle and teeth are bred in the lightless depths, where grots feed them glowing fungus and sharp rocks until they're ready to rampage. Some Squigs are small enough to bite at a shaman's nose off mid-ritual. Others are massive, magma-filled beasts, ridden into battle like living wrecking balls. The Mangler Squigs are the kings of that chaos. Two enormous Squigs, chained together, constantly biting, rolling, and slamming through anything in their way. No one truly controls them. Gitz just point them in a direction and pray. What's so great about Squigs is that they sum up the whole army's personality. They shouldn't work, they shouldn't win, but somehow, through sheer energy and unpredictability, and a total disregard for common sense, they do. And that's what makes them such a joy and a nightmare to face on the tabletop. What makes the Gitz lore so fascinating, and honestly one of my favorites, is that under all the chaos, there's a strange consistency. The Gitz are true believers. Their god may be insane. Their rituals may involve licking mushrooms until they see the stars. But their convictions never waver. In a world ruled by arrogant gods and fragile mortals, the Gitz have something pure. Faith without doubt. Next, we'll climb out of the lore caves and onto the hobby desk to talk about what it's like to actually build and paint these fungal fanatics. From Squig Herds and Troggoths to the kings of madness themselves. Now that we've crawled through the lore caves, let's talk about the hobby side. Because if there's anything about Gloomspite Gitz absolutely nail, it's personality on the hobby desk. Every model in the army oozes character, from the tiniest grot swinging a rusty cleaver to the biggest Squig trying to eat the scenery. Over the last few weeks, I've gone all in on Gitz, and honestly, it's been some of the most fun I've had in the hobby. I've officially built and assembled the entire army. This includes 2 full Squig Herds, 4 units of grot Bounderz, my Mangler Squig, and fully painted and finished Loon King, Squig himself. On top of that, I've built and assembled the entire Git Mob Battle Force box, plus some of my favorite supporting heroes, the Rabble-Rouser, the wonderfully bizarre Gobbapalooza, and a Squig boss with Nasher Squig. Seeing all of them come together feels like watching the bad moon rise over my hobby desk. Chaotic, colorful, and a little unhinged in the best of ways. One thing that really stands out is how approachable these kits are. Everything fits together nicely, no frustrating seams or delicate balancing acts. You can just sit down, throw some music on, and fall into the hobby flow. Even the big centerpiece kits like the Mangler Squigs are surprisingly intuitive once you start building them. The model tells a story all by itself. 2 giant Squigs chained together, thrashing and rolling across the battlefield in pure destructive joy. It's easily one of my all-time favorite Warhammer sculpts. Well, there's Trugg the Sun Champa, my other favorite model in the range. He's ridiculously in the best possible way. All teeth and swagger, and painting him is pure fun. The Gitz walk this perfect line between comedy and horror. On one hand, they're hilarious, fungal fanatics with goofy grins, but on the other, the closer you look, the darker it gets. Their faces are twisted, their gear is corroded, and everything looks like it's been grown, not forged. It's a gross kind of beauty that fits perfectly in the mortal realms. I've gotten most of the army primed now and can't wait to start painting. My plan is to lean hard into the vibrant toxic palette. Maybe some deep blues for the Squigs, glowing greens and purples for the mushrooms, and grimy armor tones to tie it all together. I want them to look like they just crawled out of the deepest cave in Gur and brought the spores with them. Messy, bright, and alive. That's the Squig aesthetic, for me. What I love most about this army, it never takes itself too seriously. Every model feels like it has its own story. You can paint them however you like, bright and cartoony, dark and grungy, or somewhere in between, and it still works. There's no wrong way to hobby Gitz. They remind me of why I started this hobby in the first place, for fun, creativity, and those chaotic moments when your Squig somehow eat a dragon, because you rolled a handful of 6s. Next up, we'll talk about how all the chaos translates to the tabletop, what the Gitz actually do in battle, and why they're one of the most unpredictable armies in the game, and how that makes them so much fun to play. So what happens when all the mushrooms-fueled madness hits the tabletop? Pure, glorious chaos, and that's exactly why I love the Gloomspite Gitz. They're unpredictable, explosive, and just straight up fun to play. You never quite know what's going to happen, and half the time, neither does your opponent, and that's the part of the charm. In 4th edition, the Gitz lean hard into their strengths as board control army. With the shift from bravery to control scores, this faction actually gained more reliability. You're not losing units to Battleshock anymore. Instead, it's about who holds the ground, and Gitz excel at that. Between hordes of grots, bounding squigs, and their ability to swarm the board, they can outcontrol most elite armies through sheer presence. You might not hit the hardest or survive the longest, but if you can flood the field, you can outscore just about anybody. Movement-wise, the Gitz are deceptively quick. A lot of units have high movement characteristics, especially the squigs. And between run and charge buffs, redeploy tricks, and tunneling units, they can close distance fast. That's where the rabble-rouser comes in. He's an incredible flexible support hero. He can deploy underground and pop up in the movement phase, letting you drop threats right when you need them. On top of that, he gives you a monster and beast ability to run a charge, which turns units like the Mangler Squig into a missile of destruction. Drop him in the right place, time your charges, and suddenly the Bad Moon followers are in your opponent's backline before they can even react. Then you've got the Gobbapalooza, and this unit is absolutely wild in 4th edition. It's a group of unpredictable little shamans who hand out incredible buffs for damage and charges. They're the unsung heroes of the army, boosting hit rolls, increasing mobility, and even potentially shutting off enemy commands when the timing's right. And if that's the disruptive ability utility that keeps the opponents guessing, let the rest of your army capitalize on openings. Your mainline hitters are still your Boingots, Bounderz, and your Squigs. The Bounderz are one of the best charging units in the game for their cost. Lethal when they hit, surprisingly sturdy for grots, and just plain hilarious in action. The Squig boss with the Nash Squig pushes them even further, whipping nearby Squigs into a frenzy and giving them that sweet extra bite on their attacks. Combine that with a Loon King's aura, you can turn a playful stampede into a devastating strike. And of course, there's my favorite, the Mangler Squig, the poster child for Gitz madness. It's your hammer, your wrecking ball, and your comedy relief all in one model. It hits like a truck, bounces around the battlefield with absurd speed, and when it finally goes down, it goes down in style, usually taking something with it. It's one of those units that never plays the same way twice, and that's why it's so much fun. What I love most about this army is how alive it feels. Between the movement and the randomness, and the endless buffs, every turn feels dynamic. The Gitz reward smart positioning and timing, knowing when to drop the Rouser ambush, and when to commit your Squigs. When to stack your buffs for key charge. You can't play them on autopilot, but if you embrace the chaos and plan your pushes, they'll surprise you with how deadly they can be. Their biggest strengths on the board is board control and speed. They own the movement phase and can trade units while still holding objectives, thanks to strong control scores and recursion from the Loon Shrine. Their main weakness? Fragility. Even your hard-hitting squids can melt fast if you mistime your attacks or get caught out in the open. But that's the risk-reward balance that makes them so satisfying. Every win feels earned. Every crazy comeback feels legendary. And at the end of the day, the Gitz are what the Age of Sigmar is all about. Wild stories, memorable games, and armies that play with heart. No two matches ever feel the same. And whether you're bouncing squigs through elite units or tunneling under the board to snatch an objective, you're guaranteed to have fun. Next up, we'll zoom out a bit and talk about the Gitz in a wider hobby, their place in the Warhammer culture, and why they've become such a beloved faction, and how they've managed to capture the imagination of so many players across the community. If there's one thing that makes the Gloomspite Gitz stand out a rest from the Age of Sigmar, it's how much life and character they bring. Not just to the tabletop, but to the entire Warhammer community. They're one of those factions that people fall in love with, whether they play them or not. Because every time you see them on the table, you can't help but smile. They're equal parts hilarious, horrifying, and downright creative. And that combination has turned them into one of the most beloved armies in the game. Every grot player that I've ever met has their own twist on the Bad Moon's madness. Some lean into the comedy, wild colors, goofy conversions, squigs painted like rubber duckies. Others go the opposite direction, grim, swamp-dwelling cave horrors covered in dripping mushrooms and glowing spores. The army gives hobbyists total freedom to express themselves. You can make them silly or sinister, bright or disgusting, and it always fits the tone of the army. That's rare. And it's not just the models, it's the storytelling. The Gitz aren't noble heroes or sinister masterminds. They're underdogs, the unhinged lunatics of the mortal realms who somehow keep surviving no matter what's thrown at them. They don't conquer empires, they infest them. They're the fungus that grows back after the fire, the laughter in the dark. The reminder that chaos doesn't always come from gods, but sometimes it comes from a mob of screaming goblins who just want to bite something. That personality bleeds into the player base too. Gitz players tend to be the most fun people to play against. They're there for the story, for the dice rolls, and for the moment that makes you laugh even as your army gets eaten by a bouncing ball of teeth. They bring energy to events, creativity to hobby nights, and that infectious reminder that game is supposed to be fun. From a design perspective, it's also incredible how deep the range has become. The models, from the classic grots to Trugg the Troggoth King, tell a story that feels like it's evolved from the game itself. They bridge the gap between Warhammer's humor and its darkness. They remind us that not every army has to be stoic or tragedy. Sometimes it's okay to have an army that's just weird, loud, and joyful. For me, that's why I love the Gitz. They capture everything that makes the Age of Sigmar unique. Their creativity, the absurdity, the room for passion and expression. Whether it's your first army or your fifth, they've got something that pulls you in. Maybe it's the squigs, maybe it's the madness of the Bad Moon, and maybe it's just the fact that you can build an entire army around mushrooms and somehow still take the game off of competitive players. Either way, the Gitz aren't just a faction, they're a vibe, and it's a vibe that's here to stay. Next up, we'll wrap up this episode with some closing thoughts, a look at where the Gitz fit into the current meta, and what the future might hold for them in 4th edition. And of course, my closing send-off to all of you cave-dwelling champions of chaos out there. The Gloomspite Gitz have always been one of the most unpredictable armies in Age of Sigmar, but that's exactly what makes them so special. They're the great equalizer in the mortal realms. You don't have to be a top-tier player or a meta expert to enjoy them. You just have to embrace the chaos and trust the dice. And that's something I think a lot of us can relate to. Whether it's in gaming or in life, sometimes you just have to roll with whatever the bad one throws your way. From a gameplay perspective, the Gitz feel like they found their rhythm in the 4th edition. The changes to control score and unit activation give them new life. They're faster, more strategic, and better able to leverage their mobility and unity for sure. They'll still lean and explode spectacular sometimes, but that's part of the fun. You're not playing them because they're consistent. You're playing them because there's no other army that gives you stories like this one does. Looking ahead, I'm really excited to see what Games Workshop does with the next. We've already got Trugg leading the Troggoths and some incredible sculpts for the Squigs and Heroes, but imagine what the next raid could look like. Maybe a new Underworlds warband, or even a narrative tie-in with future Dawnbringers or the Realm campaign. The Gitz are the kind of army that fits anywhere, because chaos and comedy always find a way to creep in. And more than anything, that makes me think that this faction shines is the people who play them. Every Gitz player I've met, from local nights at J&J Gaming Factory to online hobby communities, brings an energy that makes the game even better. They remind everyone why we paint, why we roll, and why we laugh even when our Mangler Squig explodes and takes out half of our army with it. So whether you're just starting, or you've been under that bad moon for years, I hope this episode helps you appreciate what makes the Gloomspite Gitz so unique, from the lore to the hobby to the table. And as always, thank you so much to everyone who listens and shares and supports the podcast. The show's been growing faster than ever, and it means a lot knowing that so many of you are out there painting, building, and gaming right alongside me. If you want to keep up with everything Rolling Recklessly, you can find me on Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast and on YouTube at Rolling Recklessly. I've also got some new events and community nights coming up at J&J Factory here in Glendale. So if you're local, come and roll some dice and say hi. Until next time, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.